on the CEDO city website. And we wanted to go through and introduce one another as well. Again, starting off, Jeff Clark, Ward 4 Steering Committee. And I see Jeff Comstock first on my screen.
Okay, yeah. Hello, I'm Jeff Comstock, Steering Committee representative from Ward 7. And I guess I would put in a plug that Ward 7 is down to 2 steering committee representatives, and we would certainly like some other folks to join us. So even if it's not you, suggest it to your neighbors. Thank you.
If you could just pass it to someone, Jeff, and I'll
Okay.
unmute them.
Yep, Eric?
Eric Corbin.
Yeah, Eric Corbin, Ward 4 Steering Committee. And I'll pass it to Sarah Carpenter.
Sarah Carpenter, Ward 4 City Councilor.
Pass it to Bob Hooper.
Bob Hooper, State Rep 6-1. Thanks. Pass it to TJ, who's down in the corner there.
I am TJ. I live in Ward 4, and I will pass it to Carol Odie.
Thank you. I'm Carol Odie. I'm Ward 4 and a state rep in District 6-1, and I will pass it to Mark Barlow.
I am Mark Barlow, and I'm the North District City Councilor. And I will pass it to Jenna O'Donnell.
Hello, everyone. I'm Jenna O'Donnell and Millie O'Donnell. Sorry for joining late. Good to see everyone. I just joined, so I'm afraid I don't know who else needs to go.
Amy.
Thanks, everybody. Amy Bilowski Branch, Ward 7, and I'll pass it to Sylvia.
Sylvia might not be there right now. Evan?
You? No, which Sylvia? What the hell? More than one Sylvia?
Hello?
Is there more than one Sylvia?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Which Sylvia?
Well, you are familiar to us, yes.
Which ward, Sylvia?
Which? Oh, I'm in Ward 7.
Great, thank you. Go to Matt Hurlbert.
Matt Hurlbert, Ward 7 and Steering Committee.
Like what? Okay.
Ed Murphy.
Hi, I'm Ed Murphy, Ward 4, resident down in Nottingham Lane, and sitting in to hear all the cool stuff this summer. I'll go to, I believe, Evan Litwin.
Oh, good. Thank you, Liam. I'm Evan Litwin. I'm a Ward 4 steering committee member. And I will pass to, just looking around, trying to remember, has Norm Baldwin gone? Okay, thanks.
I've not, so thank you. Norm Baldwin, City Engineer, work for Department of Public Works. And I'll pass to Rob Goulding, who's my colleague at Public Works.
Hi, thank you everyone for having me. My name is Rob Goulding. I am the Public Information Manager at Public Works, and we really appreciate you having us today.
How about Tony Redington?
Yes, unmuted. Tony Redington, I'm from Ward 3 and on the steering committee in Ward 3. And note that we will, at our July 8th meeting, we will be having a candidates forum for the candidates who are running for to replace Brian Pine for the Ward 3 City Council. So if you want to see some election, pre-election campaigning, July 8th is the day to tune into the NPA 2-3. Thank you.
Thank you. Peter Ireland.
Peter, I've asked you to unmute and you're just going to have to click. There should be a prompt that comes up and you just have to click something.
Does that do it?
Yep.
Yes.
I'm Peter Ireland, Ward 4. Somebody raise your hand.
Chris Bear.
Hi, Jeff.
Hi all, Chris Bear, Ward 7 resident.
Have we gotten everybody?
I think Stephen Hamlin wanted to introduce.
Steve Hamlin, Ward 7 resident.
All right. So we wanted to see if anyone had announcements at this point. And I will do one first because we wanted to get input from members of the NPA, Wards 4 and 7, about upcoming meetings. We will be kind of getting ready to have a hybrid meeting where we're half in person or half at the Miller Center, back where we had been in the past. And we're kind of working out some of the kinks of how that will operate with Town Meeting TV and others, and CEDO. And I guess I'd like to take a count of people that think that they would be coming back to the Miller Center, and those that think that they would like to continue on with Zoom. How could we get a good number? I was thinking, I'm seeing—
Raise your hands.
Yeah, everyone raise their hand if you're going to be coming to the Miller Center.
So Liam, are you able to?
Yeah, I'm counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 to the Miller Center.
Okay.
We've got about 23 participants, so maybe half. So we have some presenters tonight. That is good feedback, and what we're doing is taking a couple of months to get prepared for that. And in years past, we've taken at least a month or two off in the summer. So we'll be taking July and August off and be back in September is our plan. Sarah, go ahead. You can unmute. Did you have a question? Go ahead, Sarah.
Yeah, I'm getting used to the unmutes. Two things that I wanted to throw out there, and I don't want to do. We had really wonderful success with the meals group, and that draw a lot of people to the NPAs. And so, before we get decided one way or the other. I'd really hope that we can check in with them to see if there's still the interest in doing those potluck suppers prior to the NPA. I mean, probably not maybe till the fall, but I had heard the group was still interested in trying to pursue that. So I just think that's a piece of information that's important for us to figure out before we go kind of too much one way or the other. The other thing, and this is maybe a little bit premature in the agenda setting, Mark and I are going to talk about the redistricting resolution that will be considered at City Council. Part of that resolution is to ask the NPAs to appoint somebody to a committee that we think we're going to put together on redistricting. And I just, if that comes to be, I'd love us to encourage us to consider maybe a special meeting on the conversation of redistricting, maybe towards the end of the summer. And I don't know if people would be open to that, and I'm happy to help, but I think it would be a good thing to have a conversation on it before the ad hoc committee gets going. So I'm just sort of tossing that out there as something I'd like us to consider.
Okay. Yeah, definitely. You know, that is a big topic, and, you know, sounds like it would be a, you know, at least an hour. What do you think?
Right. So I'm hoping maybe maybe I'm just tossing this out here, rather than our regular NPA, we could still consider a conversation on the redistricting later on in the summer as sort of what I'm going to call a special NPA meeting. So I hope we can be maybe open to that.
Okay.
I was wondering, do you think that would be a all wards NPA meeting? Would that be?
No, that we're getting, and I can wait till we get to the thing, but one of the provisions of the resolution we're considering on Monday is that each NPA each ward appoint somebody to the committee. And the process would be the NPA would, if there's more than one person interested, that we would vote on that. So there would be a need to kind of vote on it. Personally, Mark and I were thinking that it would be also useful just to have an open-ended conversation about what are the issues that could be looked at as part of the agenda of this committee. So it wouldn't be anything in particular. It would be just perhaps an open-ended discussion to get feedback from everybody around, you know, what are you thinking? How do you like the system we have now? Are there things you'd like to see in a new system? That kind of conversation. And then a process to appoint somebody to a committee that will then meet with a representative from each ward to really start digging into some details, and then ultimately come back to City Council.
All right, so Sarah, can we pick up on that conversation during your agenda segment with particular attention? You and Mark can address some of the time sensitive steps in that process?
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else for an announcement before we jump into the agenda?
Oh, I guess I would add for all of our regular neighbor attendees that this is actually Liam's last meeting with us as our CEDO NPA liaison. He is moving on to bigger and brighter things, and we really have appreciated his work with us immensely. He's helped us make a good transition to a new active format here. And Liam, we all really appreciate the work that you have done for us. So thank you.
Very much. I appreciate that. I was actually also unmute. I wanted to unmute to let everyone know, since we just have so many new people in, if you'd like to talk, we've limited the ability to unmute yourselves. So if you want to talk, just raise your hand either sort of this way or using the raise your hand function like I have done, and I can unmute you for your segment.
Is there anything you would like to elaborate on in terms of your future?
As of right now, I'm actually going to hike the Long Trail in September. So I'm going back home to essentially help my grandparents out and train for the Long Trail. My home is in New York, in Southern New York, right outside of the city. So that's my current plan. I don't really have anything past that. We'll see what happens.
Oh, well, then you should know that Nancy and I are Long Trail shuttle drivers. So if you need assistance on the trail, you call us.
That sounds great. Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Keep us in mind.
I will, absolutely. And I've genuinely loved the 4 and 7 steering committee and the NPA itself. You all are a really active and lively bunch relative to some of the other NPAs. So it's been really lovely being at the meetings.
Thanks, Liam. All right. Any other announcements? Amy, I see your hand up.
Sure, and maybe this is already on the agenda. I know on the Facebook forum, there was some concern about some graffiti, some racist graffiti at CP Smith and some other things along the bike path. So I don't know if this is the right place to talk about it or if it's already been, if it's on the agenda or if people are aware of it. So I just want to raise it, and then if we can add it to the agenda or if someone else already has a plan to talk about it.
Well, we have the DPW folks later. And Sarah has her hands up.
Well, just to let everyone know that the 3 city councilors from the north, we did have a meeting on it today, and we met with the Pride Center, and we have a couple thoughts about things that we'd like to see happen. And so I'd like 2 minutes to talk about it, not a lot tonight, but I think there's a number of proactive things that we need to think about doing in the future.
Great, thank you.
Jeff, I just have a quick.
Go, Matt.
I've had a lot of people ask me where their updated and grieved tax assessed values are. And I'm told through sort of the rumor mill that the city's behind and is distributing, I think, for July 1st. So I'll transition from announcements to city council with a question. Do any of you know if that's true? Are people going to see it? And I assume there's a 14-day grievance, and I assume it's going to be a cluster because tax bills also come out on the 1st.
I've been away for a week. The last I knew, they were supposed to come out this week, so I have not inquired any further about the delay because I wasn't expecting it till now or the end of a few days. We can certainly do that and try to let people know.
You guys may not know. I just thought I'd ask if you did.
I mean, I understand you'll have 14 days from whenever you received the letter, so I don't think that slows down the appeals. And as I understand it, 14 days to appeal it, but then they've got to set a hearing, which may take, lots of weeks if there's lots of people. So as I understand it, that's sort of irrelevant not irrelevant, but it doesn't coincide with the timeline of the tax bills, and wouldn't even if it came out this week.
So as Matt did, why don't we start with the city councilors? And we do not have the school board commissioners here this evening, so we have a little bit more time in elected officials if you'd like it. So I'm looking at the numbers, and the 3 of you could have 15 minutes if you'd like, or we can adjust as we go too. But I just want to be fair with the allotted time. And Sarah, why don't, since you're right at the top, if you want to get started, that would be great.
Sure. I clearly don't think I need 15 minutes. And in part because, this has been, in fact, a very busy month for the council, but it's really been all budget centered. We've just had a whole series of meetings special meetings on the budget, walking through each department and each division. And staff did a great thorough job, but that has taken a lot of bandwidth to just, and particularly for me, since it's it's really my first full budget season. If you recall, last year we went into crisis mode because of COVID. So we'd gone in with a series of principles. We had a target reduction of the budget, and we had some principles about not trying to lay off people. So it was a very different procedure. This year, we're back to proposing, hopefully, sort of pre-COVID programming, trying to keep up at least level to where we were in 2019. So that's really been all of the discussion, and a lot of time spent reviewing each single department. And all of us have had a lot of time both for input, but absorbing of all of that. I mean, there's a lot to cover. It's probably easier to answer questions than review each division. As I said, the intent was to really focus on sort of pre-COVID operations, and hopefully we're there. We're having to make up, a chunk of that is going to be with federal money. I think it's about $3 million right now, but there's still more to be decided. There's some special initiatives, within the budget. Probably the two biggest are more attention and support for racial equity initiatives, and our fairly new racial equity and belonging office. So that's been a new target. And then there are new initiatives within the police department, in particular hiring up to 10 community service officers, which will provide a variety of functions within the department, intended to really transform the department, have unarmed personnel available for the number of complaints that we get, and be responsive. And then there's a placeholder within the budgeting process for recommendations. As you recall, we have 2 consultants out there that are looking at a variety of issues. Those won't come back until early July. And so we're sort of waiting to see what their recommends are, and there's a placeholder number for that. Another new initiative as part of that is again a little bit of a placeholder, but an approach to add a more targeted, I guess you would say, mental health component. Again, in particular, responding and working with law enforcement. We all know that often, as a last resort, folks are called in, police are called in to situations that really aren't needed for them. What we need are trained professionals to respond, somewhat like the street outreach program, which is really targeted at just Church Street. And this would be community-wide and hopefully partnering with some state organizations so that might go beyond Burlington. Some of you may have read, there's a program in the state of Oregon called Cahoots, which has been very successful in responding to persons in crisis. And we just need to figure out an appropriate professional way to do that. So that's another placeholder in terms of new initiatives. And a more modest one that I've been working on a lot is support for the city accessibility committee. The accessibility committee is sort of fizzled out. And I've been working with a group of neighbors primarily around how to get Letty Beach more accessible. And I know that's the right response. The park department is going to try a very temporary option this summer to soften the entrance or exit or access to the beach from the end of the path. That's not really acceptable and is not permanent. And again, we've been working with the park department to hopefully over the course of the summer and fall, get a plan and a number, and the number is going to be big, to get true accessibility into the park, and as well kind of support the accessibility committee more generally so that they have some technical expertise as projects come up with the city, and we can beef up the lens that things get looked at from. And then I guess we already brought up, but finally, as I mentioned today, the 3 city councilors met with members of the Pride Center to talk about how do we deal with the hateful stuff that's been going on in our neighborhood. It's been a series of stickering and just hateful stickers around, particularly the park area and the public areas. And then we had a really horrible incidents where there was hateful graffiti put in one of the playgrounds, which got corrected shortly, but I think it's coming to a head about how can we work together as a neighborhood, as a community, to be more welcoming. And we're not collectively doing a great job on that. And some of the things we talked about actually is to try to have a focused NPA with some of the groups like the Pride Center and Outright Vermont as one option. We've talked about maybe a community meeting where we try to come together and figure out how can we more proactively combat some of this and make ourselves more welcoming. The city councilors themselves talked about our own personal need to be better educated. Max Tracy joined us, and we've talked about having a work session this summer with the city councilors and again, folks from the Pride Center and other places to remind us of actually a resolution we all adopted in 2019, supporting inclusion, but obviously has not been working. So I think kind of going forward, any ideas from members about how we sort of tackle this problem would be greatly appreciated.
I did see Mark earlier. Would you want to pass it on?
Sure.
Sarah?
Sure, Mark.
Thank you. I'll also add on budget related items, 2 items that I think are of interest to the New North End. One is in the budget, there's funding for 2 urban park rangers, and these will be positions that will be responsible for responding to some of the issues we've had at Letty Beach for fires, but also off-leash dog incidents, and really being ambassadors in the park and doing education as well. So this is really exciting, I think, to have this capability available to us in the parks. And so that's in the budget for this year. Additionally, we are getting full funding for Penny for Parks. The parks during the epidemic have been, intensively used. So, and there's a lot of sort of deferred maintenance and upkeep that needs to continually be done. That's what Penny for Parks is for. And so that'll be fully funded this year. And so those are 2 things that I think are really exciting. I'll pivot now to something I wanted to talk about last month, but I wasn't able to attend the NPA. And it's actually more timely this month anyways, because it's been deliberated by the DPW Commission and by the Transportation, Energy, and Utility Committee of the City Council. And that's consolidated collection. And so the current model for trash collection and organic collection and recycling is, well, for organics and trash, it's a subscription model, and there are licensed haulers in the city that are allowed to solicit business from residents, and residents decide whether or not they want to subscribe to these services with individual haulers. And the city additionally is responsible for all the recycling. So under consolidated collection, under true consolidated collection, a single hauler would be responsible for all 3 waste streams. And so we've been sort of batting this concept around. There was a study, there was a couple of resolutions over the years that the city council has made to study this. Additionally, there was a study done by an outfit that was GBB, and it's an acronym whose 3-letter last names I can't recall right now, but it's beside the point. And they essentially did a consolidated collection study for Burlington and South Burlington. It made some recommendations about a franchise model where the city would contract with a hauler or one or more haulers to basically collect trash in different parts of the city. And so this has been deliberated at a couple of TUC meetings that I've been involved with, and additionally at the Public Works Commission. There's 2 variations on this. One is the franchise model I talked about, but the city council had asked DPW to also look at a municipal model where the city, in addition to doing recycling, would also take over the trash and organic waste streams as well. And so DPW Commission met last week, and they approved a staff recommendation from DPW for what they call the hybrid franchise model, which would be city retains the recycling responsibilities, and 1 or more haulers would be contracted to do trash collection and organic collection. TUC met last night, and they took a different take on it, which was that we passed in a 2-to-1 vote a motion to have the city council look at a municipal model. And so the next step for this is for this full city council to deliberate the matter. And so that's sort of a big change for everybody, and there'll be a lot more about that, I would say, in the next month, should it pass. And I'm not sure when the city council will get to this even, but I'm guessing it'll be later in the summer. And I guess that's all I have for now, and I'll pass it on to Ali.
Thanks, Mark.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for the NPAs. And I think with the consolidation model, collection model, I think, I've been in communication with leaders of the unions. I think they have been an integral part of this discussion, and the leaders, we have a great conversation. And I wanted to understand it also. Chapin and I will be meeting on Tuesday to talk about this further. And I think the issue that we have in this city most of the time is committees and commissions, they make a lot of decisions, but we do not involve the community members into the discussion. I think it would be beneficial for New North Enders to at least have a conversation about what do they think, what are the models, and I think we can facilitate it, or the NPAs can do it. I think it would be very beneficial for everyone. Yes, one thing that I think it would be worth mentioning here as part of the budget is there is also a $75,000 added to the budget in terms of neighborhood traffic calming, processes that never existed before. People used to wait at least 4 years in order for them to have, the city take action. But those $75,000, it does not necessarily mean, there will be a camel hump, or I don't know, how do you call them, to monitor speeding. But, I think the mayor directed DPW to look into all the alternatives of making sure that all the neighborhoods are safe and cars are not speeding very well. Yeah, and I think, talking about the budget 2 years ago, the general fund was about $82 million, you know. And yes, last year it was about $82 million. And this year, the general funds alone, the property taxes and the taxes from the businesses is about $87 million that the city of Burlington has collected. So as you know, the budget vote is scheduled to take place on Monday, the 28th. And I think that discussion there, we all think that it will pass because extensive amount of discussion has been happening and city councilors were, fighting for things that they wanted to see. And I think it will pass unanimously. I am confident to that. So as part of the budget also, as 2 years ago, 21% of the city budget, general fund budget was going to the police department, right? Last year, it was about 19%. But this year, it is specific to only 17% of the city general fund will go to the police department. And of those, there is at least $400,000 allocated to what Sarah talked about, the cohort model. Those are non-police officers, but that can respond to mental health issues that Burlingtonians are experiencing. I think that's a good thing, right? And also the CSOs, 10 of them are they're in the process of getting hired. And I think they will also work to provide some support to Church Street Marketplace. Because it's concerning when shots are being fired and 20 minutes later, it's when people take their funds to call the police. I think that's the biggest concern that I have ever experienced in the city of Burlington. But with these CSOs, we think that they could respond to some of those issues. And you all know also in the community here, we talked about the dog task force. So the new North End City Councilors, we included the community and we crafted a resolution that the City Council passed and referred it to PAC. So PAC was supposed to meet on the 21st, but unfortunately we could not meet because of these new guidelines that now we have to meet in person. The logistics were not in place, not only for PAC, but for many other city committees as well. But we hopefully think, but by next week, logistics will be in place and committees will start to meet. And there will be also the option of meeting in person and also remotely for those who want to participate. And starting on the 28th, next Monday, I believe that the City Council will be meeting in person. And we are already talking about who's going to sit where. Now we have 2 independents the logistics, and I think the city, including Max Tracy, are working proactively to provide the pilot come back in person. So I think there is one issue that is very important that I believe if it's not right now, it will come eventually over time. This issue is specific to the airport. The airport of Burlington is currently being run and managed by the city of Burlington. It is an enterprise fund, meaning that the Burlington taxpayers are not allocating money to that entity, but they just raise money through grants, through federal grants, through fees for the aircrafts and other businesses at the airport. Now, there is this mention that maybe some people are already pushing for our airport to become regional owned and operated. So there are so many models that people are talking about. There are so many models also out there around the nation, and there is not a specific model that we say this one is the best. But I think the Burlington City Council unanimously send a message saying that we want to keep our airport local and we want to keep on running it and operating it. And I think the voters of Burlington also approved a ballot item requesting for Winooski, the city of Winooski, to now have a representative at the airport commission, which is a wonderful thing. We are trying to meet, but sooner or later that conversation will be hard, but I think it will be important for us to at least have this conversation right now. I think that is it. Anything else that the city, both Carpenter and Mark, well, I think Carpenter only talked about it, and it's the stickering, it is graffiti happening. there is also one other issue that has not been public, and I have done, I think, a great job to not put it publicly yet. As you know, our neighbors here at Franklin Square are experiencing hardship, and it's been happening for quite some time. Their cars are being vandalized by knife, right? And their home windows, they receive sometimes rocks being thrown on it, right? And they're being called the language because there are a lot of Asians there. There are a lot of people of color that live at Franklin Square. So I worked in collaboration with Burlington Housing Authority and the police department. And I think DPW2 has updates that they will provide. So tomorrow at 5 p.m., pizza will be provided. And I think the community members also can show up to show Franklin Square people that we love you, we want you here. Whoever's doing this, the police also is investigating this matter. This is not public, and it would be better for us to just come together and make them understand that we are here, we are neighbors, and not only they live in a residential low-income neighborhood, they should be forgotten. And there are also other updates that I'm pretty sure Rob, Goldwyn, and team will be talking about as well. So I'm going to leave it to that, and thank you.
Thank you, and I will move over to Carol Lodi and state reps, as we've used up the time from our school board members.
Okay, hi. I thought I'd go over some things that we have passed in the House and legislature. The first one is Vermont's water quality standards. We have a new law now, and it's relating to Vermont standards for issuing a Clean Water Act Section 401 certification. It passed the House and the Senate overwhelmingly and was signed by the governor. And it puts in place evaluation tools that the state needs to assess large projects that require federal licensing or permits, such as proposed oil or gas pipeline projects. And the law also clarifies the longtime interpretation and practice that Vermont's water quality standards apply to all of Vermont's surface waters, rivers, streams, lakes, ponds, and wetlands. All those things are surface waters. We did pass a law prohibiting forever chemicals from consumer products, rather than limiting from some consumer products, rather than limiting our solutions by cleaning up a mess that's already made. We have prevented toxic substances, PFAS, from entering our state in 4 products that pose the highest risk to Vermonters' well-being, including food packaging, fire extinguisher foam, and firefighter protective equipment, rugs and carpets, and ski wax. So in this way, we're protecting Vermonters from toxic chemicals and preventing future harm to the environment and public health. We still have quite a bit of work to do in this area. However, that's a great step in the right direction. In agriculture, we have an older law, Act 148, which is Vermont's universal recycling law, which now we're not supposed to put our food scraps into our trash. So, and we've heard about pickup in Burlington being discussed at the city council and the city level. So there are some food scraps that are being fed to chickens, and that is a great thing. And however, there were some issues with whether the chickens could get those materials, and there were issues with Act 250 solid waste permitting. And so the decision we made to call the food scraps an agricultural input, and that exempted them from Act 250 solid waste permitting. And then, but they are subject to the required agricultural practices. And so we have an elegant solution to what had been a difficult problem for a while. So we're having more compost created by the chickens and eating that compostable products and food scraps, and we're keeping them out of the landfills. And they'll have to follow those strict agricultural practice regulations. Now we have created a new agricultural innovation board. That's another thing we've done. And it's going to take on the tasks of the Vermont Pesticide Advisory Council and the Vermont Seed Review Committee. They're going to look at pesticide use and how to reduce it, and the use of agricultural plastic and how to transition to more biodegradable materials. Vermont is the only state that has a seed review committee that allows for the review of the seed traits of a new genetically engineered seed proposed for sale, distribution, or use in the state. And we created this committee in the last biennium in response to the use of dicamba, which is a pest controlling herbicide in other parts of the country. We are going to take a more holistic approach to soil health and pesticide use. It's all about the soil. Good soil is good for so many reasons, and one of the reasons is that it sequesters carbon, but it's just the key. Okay, so we also did work on transportation, and which helps the transportation sector and which helps with climate. We have fare fee transit, buses statewide. We've not been able to make that a permanent policy, but we've been able to make it an annual policy for the second straight year. Amtrak is coming to Burlington, and we work to create the Amtrak Ethan Allen Express from Rutland to New York City and its expansion to Burlington. It's finally going to happen around New Year's, January 2022. We are helping the multi-unit apartment houses to get charging stations for electric vehicles. We have tripled the funds for electric vehicle incentives, although those are income tested. So a single person earning less than $50,000 is eligible for incentives of $3,000 for a plug-in hybrid and $4,000 for an electric vehicle. And for incomes of $50,000 to $100,000, the incentives are $1,500 and $2,500 respectively. And for couples filing jointly, the incentives are the same, only the cap is $125,000. So increased funding, we've increased funding for the Mileage Smart and Replace Your Ride. If you have less than 80% of median income, the incentive is 25% for fuel efficient car replacing a clunker, an older car. Emissions repair program for low income Vermonters. The eligibility is the same as for LIHEAP. If you qualify for LIHEAP, then if you have a car worth at least $2,500 and it passes all other inspection requirements, we will help pay for emissions repair if you're not passing your emissions inspection. We've required all state paving projects to pave shoulders for bicycle lanes. And we have an incentive program for electric bicycles with the same eligibility as for the tripling of funds for the EV incentives, which are income tested, but it's limited to the first 250 people who apply, and the incentive is $200 each.
Did 1 minute, Carol.
We've also, we have been addressing racial wealth disparities to begin a course correcting the historical impacts of economic exploitation and exclusion from economic opportunity. So our House Commerce Committee engaged Black, Indigenous, and persons of color businesses and community leaders across Vermont to inform and develop legislation to create the BIPOC Business Development Project in H159. and that invests $150,000 in a process to be delivered by BIPOC, driven by BIPOC, excuse me, and may include the creation of Minority Business Development Center or Authority. And it's hopefully going to provide technical support for BIPOC businesses in the procurement of state contracts. It will improve language access and cultural competency practices within state economic development programs, and strengthen state data collection to better serve the variety of identities represented within the BIPOC community. And Burlington has a thriving BIPOC community, and anytime there's anything that is going to help the BIPOC community, it will help our residents. And I've been very involved since I started in the legislature in the women's caucus. We took on 5 years ago women in correctional facilities. The women. Oh, okay. I have only 30 seconds. I'll tell you about that the next time. But we're doing some good work there. Okay, I'm done.
Thank you, Bob Hooper.
Excellent job, Carol, highlighting a lot of very important things that we're doing. The environmental stuff in particular. Great idea to get electric vehicles into people's hands. I think that when we means test it, we make a decision about whether or not we're going to get an electric vehicle out there, or whether we're going to be conscious of who buys it. I think that's impeding the program a little bit myself. The bike rebate thing, I think, will be well received. It only applies to local purchases, though. You don't have access to a bike you might like that is not available locally, and being able to use the program, which is good for local business, cuts down on the number of bikes that are available to people. Another thing that we did BIPOC wise is create kind of an opportunity for BIPOC members to get in on the marijuana production program. It's going to be pretty narrow. It's going to be pretty limited, but the rationale for it was a lot of the people that are in jail nationally for related offenses happen to be the same people that have been kind of earmarked for punishment over some others. I want to particularly talk about what we did today, which, a lot of people realize we went down. We went down to Montpelier via our bedrooms or basements or attics, and voted on a couple of bills today that the governor had decided he didn't like enough and vetoed them. I have a strange position, and Front Porch Forum came out today. Many of you have probably read it, but I support the governor's position that in the context of non-citizens voting in local elections, it's a great idea to have a uniform code that basically says to towns that want to adopt it, and I think this will be an issue that we'll be talking about here soon. This is what the committee is going to accept as far as parameters. I voted for the override because I don't think we should have to wait for people like neighbors of mine who have been here, raised kids, paid taxes, been here a long, long time to get input into the local government. I think when a lot of people think about this, and I've already gotten some emails saying you voted for this, you're wrong. People think about recent immigrants, but it's not that necessarily. There are people that are in Burlington itself who have been here for decades, that have an allegiance to their country of origin. They have not applied for citizenship here. They deserve to have a right to speak to what happens in the town that they live in, and to some degree where their tax dollars are being spent. So, I'm certainly eager to hear from you all about what your thoughts are. The House overrode the veto today by a vote, I think, Carol, 103 to 47 or something like that. Pretty much a party line vote. But it's good to move forward, I think. we had talked about gypsy moth. That's a state sort of program where they spray not a herbicide, not an insecticide, but a mold spore sort of early in the season. Too late to do that now, but I'm spending a lot of time scraping gypsy moth poop off my cars, which is something I'd rather not be doing. So I hope next year we can get this coordinated early enough that we can mount an assault on them a little bit. And Councilor Ali mentioned the airport, and the bill did not go forward this year. It came out of GovOps, as most of these charter change things do. It added a Winooski resident. It had got passed by the House. It also added another Burlington resident, so that the majority of the people on the Airport Commission could continue to be Burlingtonians, because we own the property that the airport is on as the city. And Ali's 100% right. It's funded by a mixture of so many different sources: National Guard, FAA, people that do business there, both in actually the passenger side of it is pretty small. Even Burlington High School, the Regional Technical Center, has property there for their airport mechanic program. That didn't go forward out of the Senate, and it will be taken up probably again next year, because people from the Senate who are interested in forcing the airport to become a regional entity didn't want to vote for it. So this is something I think that's going to be on the table next year, and we should be aware of it. I think, unless people have questions, that's probably all I'd like to talk about.
Thanks, Bob. If anyone has questions, I see Jenna with her hand up first. If you could unmute, Jenna, thanks.
I just want to say thank you to Bob and Carol and everyone in that House who passed H106. I think the governor just signed it into law, so it's Act 67. And part of that was including funding for local food purchasing for schools. So it's great that we're dedicating some funds to schools to support our local farmers and food producers. So thank you for passing that. That was really exciting.
Carol and I were both out on the front steps just yelling and screaming to get that going through. Right, Carol? It's important, I think, that local businesses, particularly we've learned in the context of this COVID pandemic, that keeping things going locally becomes a very important thing, because if the trucks don't start coming to Burlington on a regular basis, our shelves go empty, and that's not a good thing.
Well, and it's getting more of that food to the kids too, so that's really exciting.
Yeah, actually, I wanted to just add in that almost every year I go before the House Appropriations Committee to testify in support of funding for farm to school and for food for children. So,
Jeff Comstock.
Yes, I'm wondering if Bob and or Ali could provide us with a little more background on this discussion about regionalization pressure for the airport. So what is the context of that discussion, and where is that pressure coming from? That kind of background, I think, would be helpful. Thank you.
Jeff, Ali spoke more about pressure than I know about, and I'll let him fill in details if he's still here. But I think a lot of it is coming from F-35 context, because people think that they don't have necessarily input into what's happening at the airport, where decisions are made. And quite frankly, that has nothing to do with it, I don't think. And just the general governance thing, the South Burlington representative was added a couple of decades ago. It took a very long time to get to the point where the Winooski people were offered a voice at the table, which should have happened a long time ago too. I used to live in an apartment in Winooski right by the airport, and I swear I could see people drinking their last bit of soda as they were coming in for a landing out the apartment window. So, you know, we're moving to incorporate other people's opinions and, you know, build a governance structure that's bigger. But there are definitely some people that want regional control without Burlington having the basic ability to say no, because it is our property.
I've heard over and over that there's annoyance that Burlington owns property in South Burlington, but a lot of people own property in South Burlington, and we just happen to own the airport. So.
It's like any other business in South Burlington. I mean, it just happens to be owned by somebody that's the next town over.
All right, thank you.
Sylvia Knight, you had yours up earlier.
Oh, Ali might have something else to say on where
Okay, Ali.
hearing it comes from.
I have a question for Ali.
Yep. Sorry, the new meeting stuff is a little bit, but I think the question about where this come from is maybe to look into whoever introduced that bill to the legislature. I think it's a good concept, but I completely also agree with Representative Hooper that this is more than just, excuse me, sorry. This is more than just about the economy of the airport. The airport is doing very well, and the airport, if it's doing very well, also, we allocate. There was maybe 72 acres to begin with, but now the airport has owned over 400 or 200 acres. And there is a legal memo. I will ask our city attorney if this can be shared publicly. And for those who are interested, I'll be sure to send it to your steering committee, and maybe you can disseminate. But it should be on board doc, that a report that Ellen prepared 2 years ago. We could not talk about it because of COVID, but we talked about it at our last meeting a little bit. And we did not go into executive session because city councils were not interested even in hearing about this. But we accepted the communication and placed it on file, and also added a language that we don't want reorganization, regionalization. We want to keep it local, owned and operated by Burlington. Yeah.
Thank you.
Sylvia and Sarah, will your questions be quick? We're running a little bit.
I think so.
Okay, great. Thank you.
I have a question for Ali. What can you tell me here, or do you want to tell me in an email whether the city has settled with the Melee brothers for the abuse they received in 2018?
Yes, thank you. And I think I did ask our city attorney maybe a month ago, but before she leaves, she said she will prepare something for the full council. So as you all know, Eileen is leaving the city, yeah. I think as of July 1st, but I thank you for the reminder. I'll circle back with her and just see where we are at, because there was not only that specific, but there were also other cases that the city was involved, and she will prepare a memo for all of us. But I'll be sure to update you.
Yeah, I'm very interested. Thank you, Ali. And I wanted to ask Sarah about the redistricting. I feel like I'm missing something here. Is the redistricting in the city, or is it the state redistricting? I'm not clear about that.
Or you're muted.
Yeah, the resolution, which we'll talk about in a few minutes, would be just for the city. The state as well will also have to deal with redistricting, which would be separate from this. And I was just going to point out what Councilor Jang, that there's a fairly complete report on board docs. We can get it to you about different options around the airport. And I think it got brought up for two reasons. One of which is Eileen did all the work and she's leaving, so she wanted to talk to us about it. And in the context of the discussion of the charter change, it's been talked about. So that's really the two reasons.
Okay, thank you.
Bob, quick point.
Yeah, redistricting was just the first thing on my list, and of course I skipped over it. The information that we have early so far is that there's going to be a radical change to things in the northwest corner of the state, because that's where people seem to be moving. So when we get the final data, it might very well be a big toss up of who goes where and what happens, because so many people are moving into Chittenden County and moving out of a lot of the other areas of the state, particularly the south and the east. So I'll try to keep people posted what we hear on Front Porch Forum. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. We're going to move on to our next topic. We have a couple folks from DPW, Bob Goulding, and I think we have Norm Baldwin. Norm, you're filling in for Chapin Spencer.
Yep, that's correct. So thank you.
Welcome to the both of you. We were asking you to, and you had asked to present to us about construction going on in the new North End. We're always anxious to hear about other areas of the city too, because we're an island out here in the new North End, and you do have to go through the city to get out here. So we like to hear about the ways we get out to our island. And if you could also, we have another segment on Champlain Parkway. You were going to address that. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you folks for having us. We really appreciate it. We did reach out, ask if we could update you on construction, and certainly we'll do that. Talk a little bit about the city overall construction as well. My colleague, city engineer Norm Baldwin, will talk about the Champlain Parkway. We also asked if we could talk about consolidated collection. So it's a little bit of an unconventional approach with 3 topics. Councilor Barlow did a fantastic job of, I think, updating folks where we are as a city. So maybe I'll speed even more quickly through that, since I know time is limited. But if it's all right, I'll share my screen and kind of launch into this, and we will fit this into to the time allotted. So as Councilor Barlow mentioned, we have been undertaking a consolidated collection study for quite a while now. The City Council directed us to look at consolidated collection models whereby we would look at unifying trash, compost, and organics collection throughout the city to capture some of those efficiencies that we expect would come from such an approach. There are many different ways communities around the country do this. We undertook this study with the help of a consultant, as well as a lot of in-house research. Basically what we found is Burlington is in one of the kind of vast minorities of communities around the United States that doesn't really consolidate its approach to waste management. As I think most of the folks on this call know, the city picks up your recycling, but then homeowners, property owners are responsible for figuring out your trash collection and your compost collection, or drop-off options if that's what you pursue. So there are about 83% of communities from a national survey that was conducted where we determined that there is a consolidated collection approach in the vast majority of communities that were surveyed around the United States. What we know from what we've learned in interviews with other communities, from our consultants' work and work we've done on our own, is that there are real benefits that can be captured through a consolidated collection approach. You can see what we've listed here as, I think, a big overview of what those are. Reduced costs we would expect to residents through the collection, through more efficient collection routes with pickup of all 3 of your waste streams. Reduced environmental impacts, we're consolidating routes, expect to see less truck traffic and less vehicle miles traveled. We would hope to see an increase in safety and certainly a reduced impact on city infrastructure. You can see a couple other things we list there. I'm just gonna speed through this, but we also think quality of life and resident convenience could be captured through a consolidated approach. We are looking, you see one of the last notes on the screen, because I think this is a main concern of many. We are looking at and studying and figuring out how an opt-out mechanism works in this model, because I know quite a lot of folks like to manage their own waste, and we don't want to exclude that as we study how that could work in a system like this. There were 4 different approaches that we looked at, some that we were originally looking at, others that the TOOC asked us to continue studying or to add to what we were studying. Very briefly, I'll just say there was the franchise model, where we franchise out zones to specific haulers around the city. And while there might be multiple haulers serving the city, there's only one hauler serving specific zones, still capturing reduced truck traffic in neighborhoods around the city. There was a franchise model with a city bid, where we would also bid against the haulers to see what came out kind of on top in that scenario. It's actually how recycling started in the city generation and a half ago. There was the municipal operation model, where the city would do everything. We would pick up recycling, trash compost. We would provide all the billing, all the customer service. It would require quite a capital expenditure up front. We would need to hire more staff, buy more equipment, and reconstruct a building, since our current building would not be able to house this kind of operation. Finally, we landed on a hybrid model where the city would continue providing recycling services, but then we would franchise out the rest of the city, again via zones, where distinct haulers in each zones would pick up the remaining waste streams, still capturing the efficiencies of one hauler per neighborhood for those two waste streams, and still working on a system where you would only see truck traffic on 1 day per week in each neighborhood. There are operational things to work out, so nothing is set in stone per se. I'm not going to focus too much on this slide other than to direct you to that kind of last row to show you the anticipated resident monthly cost in the two kind of very distinct models, the municipal only model and the franchise model. Costs are somewhat comparable. You can see a quick rundown there. These are early estimates, and I think we, as we work through this, want to put more kind of meat on the bones to bring to the full council when we go, as Councilor Barlow said, nothing scheduled, but perhaps in July. What we wound up recommending after a significant amount of study and evaluation was this hybrid model where the city would continue providing recycling services, and we would figure out the right franchise system for the remaining two waste streams. We still believe this really gets us to where we want to be from an efficiency perspective, from a cost to resident perspective, and the environmental impacts that we hope would be lessened by this kind of consolidated approach. It also starts us off in a quicker timeline, as there would be less to do up front to bring this to fruition. Provides future flexibility, also maintains the private haulers who themselves are distinct businesses operating in Burlington, and still improves the efficiency and the cost effectiveness for residents. This is a lot of information, so I don't expect you to absorb all of this right now. For sake of time, we'll just move on and let you know, as Councilor Barlow said, DPW Commission did support the recommendation we brought forward with a hybrid approach, 5-to-1 vote. And the TUC last night, the Transportation Energy Utilities Committee, did recommend the city model to go forward to the City Council in a 2-to-1 vote. City Council will take this up maybe in July, and they will probably want to hear from us a little bit about all the models. They will make their own decision, potentially one of the four we've presented, potentially something different, and or ask us for more information and to come back at a future time. Nothing is set in stone, and we do want to continue to hear from folks. So there is some opportunity coming up, just to let us know if you have any clear thoughts, let your city councilors know for sure, and come to that city council meeting. This is a timeline of what things could look like if we were to implement a hybrid approach with respect to kind of a 2-3 year timeline horizon. Definitely want to hear more from you if you have thoughts. And certainly if there's questions today, we should have absolutely take those. I'm gonna move on unless it makes sense for any, the steering committee wants us to stop for questions now. I'll walk you through our construction season, and then City Engineer Baldwin will walk you through the Champlain Parkway. We are kind of at the tail end of the 2016 Sustainable Infrastructure Plan that the Mayor, Council, and DPW brought forward. It was voted for overwhelmingly and funded by the public. This level of funding allowed us to triple sidewalk reconstruction over the last 5 years. We've nearly doubled our normal paving average, paving about 20% of the city over this time frame. For one of the first times in recent memory, we've had an emphasis on proactive water main repairs through replacement or relining of these pipes. It's really important to do to avoid water main breaks in a very old city. We are, however, nearing the end of this funding. So to sustain the work of the last 4 years, and we get it, we hear from people all the time, you don't do enough. We hear from people who understand we've been doing quite a bit more over the last 4 years. But either way, to sustain the level of funding, hopefully you've seen over these 4 years, more funding will be necessary. Mayor and Council did recently allocate more funds for sidewalks in 2021, so we will yet again triple our investment in sidewalks. However, this is a community conversation that will evolve, and we encourage you to let us, your city councilors and the mayor's office, know where you stand on that, because I think it's important we all have get to weigh in on the work we've done and the work you may ask us to do over these coming years. We do look at other ways to fund projects. We're working with the state right now on the Shelburne Roundabout, a federally state funded project, where we're still going to capture a significant amount of reinvestment in the city with a less impact on the Burlington taxpayer or ratepayers. As far as specific benefits and impacts, since construction brings impacts to the city, in the new North End, I've put together what is kind of a tentative list. Things can always change based on weather, based on any kind of issues with funding that we don't foresee on sidewalks at this point, or any urgent issues that arise. But we have a pretty extensive list of segments of streets in the new North End that are going to be the sidewalks will be reconstructed. Again, I just want to highlight these are parts of the following segments. It could be anywhere from 20 linear feet. I think we have one on this list that's like 1,000 linear feet. And if you are interested in knowing more about any of these specific streets, burlingtonvt.gov/construction. I'll show that URL later, but that'll give you a clear view of where things are happening in the city and in the new North End. I'm going to keep moving just in the interest of time. People are very passionate and we understand about sidewalks. So I just share with you that we are undertaking kind of a once in every 5-year effort where we are back out there conducting a sidewalk inventory. It's a mechanical assessment of all 130 miles of sidewalk. It'll measure every dip, crevice, and crack. We overlay that data onto kind of our existing data. We score it with impacts to pedestrians, impact and proximity to senior centers, with a variety of different kinds of deficiencies that we find in sidewalks, whether they're cracks, whether there are grade issues. We take all of that data. We use that in conjunction with field visits by engineers and maintenance specialists, and your reports, whether it comes in through C-Click Fix or customer service. All of that informs every year's list with the funding that is available. And again, we have 130 miles of sidewalk, and with the enhanced funding we've had, we get to do about 3 miles a year. That's a relatively sustainable cycle of sidewalk replacement, but we are catching up to a long deferred list of sidewalks. I do want to share an important message about paving. We had a long stretch of the middle section of North Avenue from Ethan Allen Parkway to Shore Road scheduled for repaving this year. Because of some challenging issues on that segment, it did take quite a while for detailed engineering to be done to address, as I think many folks on this call know, longstanding stormwater and drainage challenges. Because of some of that work, which did take a while to get done, we also only really received one bid, which was extraordinarily high compared to what our estimate said it should have been. The paving on North Ave is likely to be delayed from this year to hopefully next year. To keep momentum behind this project, we will be using in-house labor, which we didn't anticipate doing, to do the stormwater work, to make structural adjustments, all critical work to be done before a paving project actually officially happens. And normally the paving contractor, we would ask the paving contractor as part of the contract to do a lot of that work. We'll be doing that this year to make sure this project comes in at hopefully a reasonable cost and can be done as quickly as possible. We anticipate rebidding that project later this year. To kind of supplement some of the concerns around the city, we will be pursuing patch paving bids for this year, including on the Beltline. There are some other paving projects going on, so I don't want to confuse you in the new North End. They're basically under separate contracts. Tallwood, Lakewood are scheduled for paving later this year or potentially early next year, based on its connection to a the sewer replacement project that's going on Lakewood later this year after the rain gardens are installed on that street. Paving is also happening on the lower section of North Ave, which is a continuation of 2020 work. I do see a hand. I'm wondering if folks want me to take that now or if I should keep going.
You can, it's about the slide that you have up now, so it's your choice.
Sure thing. Yeah, happy to address that.
Well, when the bike lane was added to North Avenue, it seemed like one of the things that was deficit was that the contractor did not taper the asphalt to the drains. So we ended up with pools of water everywhere there shouldn't have been, and the drains necessarily dry. And when it froze, it was pools of ice. How do we make sure that doesn't happen when these projects are done again, that there's proper drainage into the drain systems?
We do have on-site inspection during these projects. The project you're referencing probably predates me, and I'll throw that if City Engineer Baldwin's prepared to address that specific question.
Thank you.
You're welcome. You might be muted.
So your specific concern is that you have drop inlets that are effectively too high and aren't receiving drainage, correct?
Basically, it just looked like there was no uniformity of drain angle in the whole system. I mean, if you
Yeah.
look at the intersection where you go into the Hannaford, there was a huge puddle area there that probably was 50 feet. The drain was actually dry. So grading was apparently.
Yep. That section of North Avenue, and this is why we did some deep dive analysis, is extremely flat, making it extremely challenging for that system to collect runoff and get to the drop inlets effectively, efficiently without having bird baths as you've described. And so that deep dive occurred this past year, which put us in a position where it was late to get the design complete with all the changes to stormwater improvements. And we felt it important that this be a priority in this year's paving program. So we waited on the paving bids to submit once that design was complete. Normally we put the paving bids out in January, February to get competitive pricing. And this year we put it out in April, which put us at a disadvantage with the competitive pricing, coupled with the fact that we normally have 3 large contractors who perform paving operations. And our scope of work included paving operations and civil work for their structural adjustments. And one of those paving contractors elected to not bid because the complexity of that work. They want to focus on paving and make money in what they're good at. And so that was a challenge. I think our response to that was these prices are 60, 70% more than what you would reasonably expect. It just was not reasonable for us to award that work. So we're deferring that work for paving, but we are actively looking to continue this project through the use of our own forces to complete the stormwater work that's in advance of that paving. So we are actively trying to see that this thing gets done as soon as reasonably possible, while still not being irresponsible with city funds.
I think we might have to move on to the Champlain Parkway.
Yep.
While we have you, Norm.
Perfect. So I will, I'm going to be as brief as Rob and as smooth and efficient as Rob and share with you my presentation.
Rob. Thank you.
Thank you, folks.
Let's see. Here we go. Can everyone see that?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So this is a very much abbreviated slideshow, but I thought it important that people kind of get a sense of what is the Parkway and what are the project limits. This is just an introduction slide. What is the Champlain Parkway? The Champlain Parkway really is effectively a city street, 2 lanes, 1 in each direction, 25 miles an hour, and making reuse of Pine Street with significant improvements to all the things that are important to the community, particularly pedestrian access and all different modes being properly accommodated. You'll see here, this is the project itself. To give you some sense of bearing, this is Route 7 and 189. This is Main Street and Pine Street corridor, Lakeside Avenue, and then what would be proposed is the new segment of the Parkway, which is called Contract 2.
Norm, is there a presentation mode that you could hit? Or Liam?
I could probably do that, maybe. This is where I sometimes rely on.
Go to that bottom right, Norm. And left. Left. There you go.
Okay. All right.
Thank you.
So this is the corridor. What are the project goals? Well, the project goals are to improve access from 189 Route 7 interchange to the Central Business District to the downtown waterfront area. It's to improve circulation, improve mobility, improve safety on local streets in the project study area, and provide relief in the southwest quadrant of the city. There's a lot of commercial traffic, large, heavy commercial traffic service out of, like, for instance, Global, which is a distribution center for fuel. and reduce the disruption of local neighborhoods and through local traffic, street traffic. And as I said, reduce truck traffic in the neighborhood. So this system is a focus on improving pedestrian safety through exclusive PED phases. Basically, when I don't know if people are familiar with exclusive PED phase, but effectively all traffic is stopped to allow people to cross in every direction. Filling in the gaps of sidewalk network that exists within the corridor. Rebuilding these facilities that they are ADA compliant. Improving crossing opportunities through the various controls. You've probably seen them, rapid flashing beacons. As I said, reducing truck traffic. Much of the truck traffic comes from the rail yard and rail operations. Reducing traffic in front of the Champlain Elementary School. So if traffic is being serviced by the new Champlain Parkway corridor, it'll serve as one other alternative route into the downtown district and relieve some pressure within Pine Street corridor along the front of the school. There is also a focus on highlighting the importance of places of high traffic, pedestrian traffic by elevating intersections and striping in markings, and improving on-street bike facilities, as well as a shared use path. As I said, reducing truck traffic, synchronizing traffic signals to improve traffic flow. We are maintaining parking on street. And one point to make here is that along the corridor, the investment in traffic signals will include emergency vehicle preemption and a prioritization for transit. So we're trying to improve transit service along that corridor as well. So environmental benefits to this project. There is significant improvements to our stormwater system to disconnect some of that runoff that's discharged to areas in the south end and improve water quality. There's treatment facilities within that network that will improve water quality discharges. It will also improve or reduce congestion at the Pine and Maple intersections. If you're familiar with it, there's a considerable amount of traffic as it exists today at these intersections, and it's stop and go traffic with standing queues. With a signalized approach, we anticipate that there will be less congestion, less stacked queues, less emissions. One topic that's of great importance that's been in a big conversation within the community is environmental justice. We as managing the project have been working with our consultants to develop a study to review the environmental justice issues that relate to people of BIPOC communities, and if there is any sort of impacts to those communities, whether or not there needs to be any sort of mitigation. As it stands, we don't believe that there is disproportionate impacts to that community. However, we are very sensitive to the concerns that have been expressed by the public and recognize serving our community that we need to really think long and hard about those issues and I guess sort out solutions that make people feel comfortable about this project. So as I said, the project has gone through environmental justice review. We have prepared a draft EIS that is at its final stages of completion, and that final EIS will be distributed to or provided to, packaged and provided to this federal and state partners, Federal Highway and VTrans. We are very obviously concerned about what we've heard from the public is that there is fatigue with all the work that's going on within that area of the community. And that with projects like the Shelburne Street Roundabout project and all the various water relining projects, how could we advance the Parkway in a coordinated way that makes sense and is less challenging for the public? And so we're thinking long and hard about how we sequence that work once this project is positioned to move ahead to construction. Another project that we're doing that's in that vicinity is the Rail Yard Enterprise project, and as in a very positive way. We have gotten support from the state to fund advancing design of the project. And we have a cooperative agreement that's been executed this last month. Part of what we're doing in advance of getting funding from the state for this project is we're preparing an RFQ, request for qualifications for a consultant team to begin to advance that project in earnest. So this project, standing alone, will seek to advance and has been in conversation for a number of years, and we want to see it move ahead. And I'm going to stop there and leave the slide for people to connect with our Parkway's website to get more information. And I apologize for it being so brief, but we have so very little time, and I probably have used more time than I would like, and would want to leave this to questions. I'm going to stop sharing. That's all right.
Yeah. Thanks, Norm and Rob. And questions? If you have a question, please raise your hand with the raise hand function. Sylvia Knight. If you could unmute first.
Mute me then, please. Can I have that number again regarding the railroad project? It went away before I was able to get it down.
Oh, I'm sorry. Let me just a sec. Let me pull it up. Unfortunately, I closed it.
Got the telephone hotline number for the Parkway, if that's what you're looking for.
Yes, that's
Yeah,
That would be 802
802
496
496.
8656.
Thank
Yep.
you. And I had a question about that project.
Yep.
I'm aware that sometimes the railroad uses herbicides on this track near the lake. And I'm going to ask you in that project to keep in mind as you plan the project, the land management, the land arrangements, to do that in such a way that herbicides are not necessary, that we find another way to manage the land, to use land earth coverings, to use surfaces along the rail corridor itself that don't need herbicides for management. If you keep the rail, if the rail tracks are kept in good condition, they shouldn't need herbicides. We have too many, 1 million pounds of herbicides being used, pesticides being used in Vermont. And I'm looking for people to be aware of how things are planned in order to avoid future uses as much as possible.
Yep, I can appreciate that point. I think maybe I didn't explain that rail yard enterprise project very well. Effectively, it's a transportation project to develop multimodal facilities to connect Pine Street to Battery Street. And
Okay.
what you're referring to in terms of the management of rail operations, that would be through the state and the leasing agency, which is typically Vermont Rail Systems.
But I'm asking you, regardless of those entities,
Yep.
in your planning of the project, to be aware of land management techniques so that herbicides are not necessary where you're working, where that project is working.
Understood. So I would say that we are very conscious of how these types of activities impact soil conditions. And there is a strong focus for testing of any soils that we disturb or make use of. in our projects. So we are working very closely with DEC to do what is proper management of those soils themselves.
And how about water runoff whenever these things are used?
Yes, these projects go through a pretty extensive process of review.
Not that I know of. I've watched the state approval of pesticide permits, and it's very weak. I know that for a fact. I've watched it for 20 years.
Well, I think we'll move on. Thank you for your point, Sylvia, and I think everyone's taken it.
Yep.
TJ, you were next.
Yeah, so thank you both for your time. It's really disappointing to hear that North Avenue is not going to be paved. Understand that's not your problem. Is there going to at least be patching or potholes filled? It is like a landmine. It's like a third world country road, and it's the only road in and out of New North End. You have to drive on North Avenue. So is there going to be at least some improvement? It's really shameful how bad that road is.
Yeah, so I guess our starting point is to fix what is at the root cause of that problem, and that is drainage. And by getting that done, we're positioning ourselves to be able to do a repair that will last and endure and not continue to have the same problems we face today. And without question, if we see areas that are problematic, we are going to work to patch those by some means or method. But the full scale repair, the starting point is to get the drainage complete and to really not waste the investment that we've had for so many years without doing that work. So stormwater drainage is a big important piece to this puzzle.
So just one other follow-up with C-Click Fix. I've used that, and on my own road where I live, there's been some pothole filling, but I've been shocked that when people come, there are many potholes around it that they don't fill. So do I need to take a picture of every single pothole in the road, or should I assume that if they see other potholes, they would also fill those?
PJ, that's a great question.
I would assume that staff working in the field doing that work is very diligently trying to find and repair any pothole they see. And if there is some sort of failure on our part to really not effectively do that, please feel free to call our office and we will follow up on it to make sure it's addressed. Or you could through C-Click Fix submit that concern.
And I'll just add to that. I've talked to our maintenance team about this because it's come up before. So they try to be as diligent as possible. They will look at the C-Click Fix report and any pictures or descriptors that are included, and their kind of in-house policy is not to pass over potholes either. So when they're driving to fix another pothole list, if they see road deficiencies and they can manage it, they will. That's not to say it always happens. So I would just say in your C-Click Fix report, pictures always help, but we don't expect you to spend all that time taking as many photos as possible. But if you give a good description that you've got some potholes right outside your door at XX address, but there are potholes up and down that street, that's going to help us kind of plan the day and hopefully give a good descriptive list to the folks that head out to do that. And sorry that that's happened to you a couple of times where not every pothole has been filled outside.
Yeah.
Thank you.
TJ, thanks for bringing it up. That's usually my question the last few years. Matt, you were next.
Thanks, Jeff. Someone is bad guy instead of you, so you get a relief. Norm, just a quick question. I haven't studied the proposal before now, but I just went to the website for the Parkway.
Yep.
And it looks like it's using the old road that was built in the 70s or 80s that sort of runs parallel to Queen City. Is that a new road that it sort of dumps onto for, it looks like several blocks that kind of runs along the rail yard?
It sounds like you're referring to contract one, which is the existing roadway that was developed in the late 80s.
Yep.
It connects Route 7 with Home Avenue.
Yep.
Yeah, that will
And
have
then
to be
there's a
redeveloped.
new road proposed in front of that that sort of parallels the industrial area. And then it looks like it eventually dumps onto Lakeside Avenue. Is that right?
Yes, the new segment connects into Lakeside Avenue.
right near the public
Yeah,
works
right next to
building.
Public Works.
And then you would have to come down and connect one block at Cumberland Farms and Public Works to Pine. So
Correct.
would there be further improvements or widening to Pine Street as well to get
Yes.
that flow?
So one of the things that I didn't go into explicit detail was the development of a shared use path along the entire corridor that goes from Home Avenue north to all the way to Kilburn Street.
Okay. I mean, it doesn't seem
And then, yeah,
bad or scary. It seems like it's going to be a little better traffic flow off Pine Street for the most part. And then if there's improvements to Pine Street coming downtown, it might be better, smoother, faster, safer.
well, our goal is to keep speeds at an appropriate speed for a downtown street with a lot of activity, both for pedestrians and cyclists.
But
Our-
faster maybe than it is if it's congested now where things are kind of not moving great.
Well, I think some of the things that we're trying to focus on is, number one, providing accommodation, proper accommodation for all modes.
Yep.
We're trying to take commercial traffic out of neighborhoods, large truck traffic out of neighborhoods. And we're trying to provide good crossing safe points of crossing along the corridor, particularly like, for instance, Maltex. We have a rapid flashing beacon that we put in at that location, but we're looking at tabled intersections that raise those areas of prominence where a lot of pedestrians are crossing, so that it is clearly a place of interest for pedestrians to cross, but also to signal drivers that it is an active crossing area. So there's a lot of improvements there that don't exist today.
And for trucks to want to use it, it would have to be probably smoother, faster, better.
Well, for trucks to use it, I think the preferred choice is to not be going through neighborhoods,
Right.
but go to a street.
Oh, no, I totally agree. I mean, I would think that the neighborhood would want less of that.
Yep.
So I'm just trying to understand that it would actually be a benefit, not a hindrance, but it
So
seems
as an example, you have Global, which is a fueling depot for the state. You have large commercial traffic that is tankers are filling up and they're traveling down Flint Avenue. Or they're
Okay.
circulating on Pine Street to Home Avenue to get to Route 7 South. In this case, they would likely probably make use of the Parkway and connect on to the Parkway from Flint Avenue and go directly to
Out to Shelby.
189 and
Yep.
Route 7.
Okay.
And avoid all that traffic within that neighborhood.
Okay. I don't want to hog any more time. I thank you.
That's just one element of what it could do.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you again, Rob and Norm. And we're going to move to our next segment on the Champlain Parkway. Tony Redington and Steve Goodkind asked for some time.
Thank you.
Okay, Tony Redington speaking. The question is whether or not Steve Goodkind, who starts our presentation off, is able to access. We've had an issue with the telephone number and so forth. Steve, are you there?
I do not see Steve, Tony, unfortunately.
Okay. Liam, can I share a screen?
Give me 1 second. You should be able to. Yeah, you're a co-host. You should be able to share your screen.
Okay, let me go back and hit I have to hit the button though, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Your screen?
Center your screen.
Okay, and now I'll go to the screen that I want to use. How is that? Do we have the Champlain right way in front of everyone?
Not yet.
Ooh. Let me go back, share screen. I've hit that, but you're not seeing anything from my computer.
Unfortunately, no. But I believe I have this presentation.
It's the same one we've used, yes.
Yeah, I can find it. And
Well, it's still confusing as to why oh, wait a second, let me expand this. Let me try, if I hit share, the shared screen and then go over to this and I put share, how's that? I think we're there.
Yes.
Okay.
Good, Tony.
I guess I'm not going to invest in Zoom tomorrow. Okay. And I need to close down this so I can see the slide myself. All right. Tony Redington and Steve Goodkind, sort of updating where we are with the Champlain Parkway. Obviously, there's a little there's some differences in the view of the Pine Street Coalition and the Vermont Racial Justice Alliance with the current design and with environmental justice. Let's take a look again first at the map of how we view the current design and what we call the right way, which is a parkway which works for the community and the neighborhood. And as you look at the screen here, you have what's really the new roadway from Route 7. And it's okay. The dotted line is the current parkway route from Main Street to Lakeside, and then down to where it connects with Vermont Interstate 189 and Shelburne Road. And our view of the parkway is that it would serve as Norm Baldwin indicated, getting trucks off from Home Avenue in the neighborhoods in the addition, and connect to Flynn Avenue, but stop there. That there's no particular reason now today to extend that roadway further. And secondly, as Norm Baldwin also explained, we really believe the rail yard project should be built first. And there's been some discussion at City Council by City Councilors on this, because right now the major concern or the major bottleneck in the project in environmental justice is that the traffic down in this area here declines by about 70%. And the traffic in the King Maple neighborhood, which the city has always opposed, city councils and mayors have always opposed the routing through the King Maple neighborhood, increases 37%. That's the environmental injustice, a disproportionate impact in an area that's 84% low and moderate income versus an area down here which is 14% moderate and low income. The second piece is the rail yard enterprise project. If this were built first, and I'm just giving this because of the discussion that's just taken place, if we were to build this first, this would actually decrease the traffic through King Maple by 59%, rather than increasing it 37%. It doesn't take a civil engineering degree to figure out that why not build this segment, which was looked at and rejected by the federal government and rejected by Vermont Agency of Transportation until the Pine Street and came along and said, hey, we're going to go to court. We don't like this project. And suddenly the federal highway, which had opposed and prevented this segment from being built, turned around and said, oh, gee, well, this doesn't look so bad after all. And then they came back a year later and they said, well, not only does it not look bad, we'll actually fund it for you. So in a way, what we're asking for today is the rail yard to be done first, which will have a huge benefit to the low income and community of color in King Maple, and at the same time still allow, as the project is built, a decrease in traffic down in the lower end of the area. So let's go on from there. I'll try to very quickly go through. The project, again, has been pretty well explained. Its original design was to improve traffic circulation, reduce traffic burdens in the residential neighborhoods, and improve motorist and pedestrian safety on local streets. However, as decades have gone by, and we're talking about the 1960s, the urban planning, the cultural and societal environment of the city has drastically changed. A new solution is necessary. So in the 1960s, we were talking about a 4-lane divided highway, a ring road around Burlington. A lot of us, the folks in the New North End know that very well because the Beltline was part of that part of that ring road, and there was to be a circumferential highway to connect the old north, the new north end, excuse me, the new north end to through the circumferential highway to I-89, and therefore we would have a circle. The original Champlain Parkway was going to go right straight through the waterfront with a 4-lane divided highway. The circumferential highway was actually finally ended about 2011 when Governor Shumlin said it stops. So in the case of King Maple neighborhood, again, 37% increase in traffic, and in the lower part of this lower part of the project, there would be a 72% decrease in traffic. The project would increase traffic and disruption to King Maple neighborhoods as well as Lakeside neighborhood and those along Pine Street. Pine Street is not widened. It's left at the same width as it is today. The project also fails to meet the goal of improving circulation, mobility, and safety on local streets in the study area. And finally, the proposed plan would further eliminate parking, create risks to floodplains, add to global warming, and potentially release hazardous wastes. The project itself malignantly ignores the affected low-income community, marginalizes the affected minority community, and fails to consider public health impacts. This is the picture that, if the picture tells 1,000 words, it was this one which conveyed a huge message to myself and to a lot of us. The students getting on the school bus at the intersection of Pine and Maple Streets shows the pervasiveness of the community of color that we have in the King Maple neighborhood. Now here's the numbers. They're pretty obvious. If we look at the bottom of Pine Street, there's a 72%, the Pine Street being below Flynn Avenue towards the city line and South Burlington, there's a 72% decrease in traffic. But if you live where those kids are getting on the bus, well, there's a 37% increase. And that is the disproportionate impact that the city doesn't want to talk about. And by the way, Norm made his presentation and the city has its position. The mayor in the city has refused to talk to anyone from Pine Street Coalition now for 5 years. We've asked to meet with the mayor, to meet with him in his office, and have just been turned away. So we have said since the beginning that we want to sit down and work out a sensible, collaborative approach, and the city has, to this time, has failed to do so. Again, the numbers: traffic increase on King Maple up 37%, traffic below Flynn Avenue on Pine Street down 72%, 77%. By the way, City of Burlington has 26% of our households have poverty level incomes. And those poverty level incomes, as I'm sure you know, in the new North End, are concentrated in the old North End and the King Maple neighborhood. We have one of the highest poverty rates in the state. The rest of the state is less than 12%. Okay, so what we're saying is this: first, do the rail yard, put King Maple first, stop the Parkway from going through King Maple altogether. Let's talk about walk and bike, because you're given the impression, oh, everything is fine. We're going to take care of pedestrians. We're going to take care of bicyclists. Well, the rail yard project's $20 million. We've got about a $40 million or $50 million Parkway project, and the original Road to Nowhere, which is going to be ground up and recycled, was another $40 million investment. Altogether, we're talking about over $100 million investment on this roadway. The biggest since probably the only other project of that size in the city has been the Beltway. And you're going to spend $100 million and you're not going to get 1 inch of sidewalk, not 1 inch of new sidewalk. You're not going to get 1 inch of safe, separate bikeway or safe, separate accommodation of cyclists. And this is the whole resistance and upsurge of the South End community against this current design has started with the Walk Bike Council letters and their endorsement of the Pine Street redesign guidelines, which call for a sidewalk from top to bottom, a new sidewalk. And by the way, that applies to the rail yard too. There's no sidewalk there and there's no separate bikeway provision. So here's what it might look like along along the Parkway by the South End Co-op. Here's the walkway. Here's a separate bikeway, and there's the two-lane road, and that's possible. What we have now is a waste of money. We actually the Pine Street proposal will reduce the cost of the overall project by about $8 million by reducing the amount of basically 1.5 lane miles of roadway. So we won't go over the sections, but basically we would have a bikeway, a world-class one that would connect with a bike path, the Burlington bike path on both ends, so that you'd be able to make a circuit, which would have a tremendous value in terms of promoting tourism and recreation in our city. And you would have the rail yard connection over to Battery Street, so that we suddenly are able to reduce the pressure and the congestion and the pollution and the injuries in the King Maple neighborhood. And by the way, if you're going to, the city says, oh, we're going to improve the congestion. This was asked by one of the questioners. We're going to improve the movement of traffic along Pine Street. That is done by introducing traffic signals on 2 points on Pine Street inside the King Maple neighborhood. One at Pine Street and one at Maple Street and one at King Street. Those kids getting on the bus would be facing a 20% higher chance of being injured. And this would also apply to everybody living in that neighborhood if you switch an always stop to a signal. Engineers will tell you the safest intersection is always stops. It is for the pedestrians, and for 30% of the people who live in King Maple have no car. They're walk dependent, they're transit dependent. And blasting through the King Maple neighborhood with 2 new traffic signals, I would call it punishment. And I'm not sure what they did wrong. So the Champlain Right Way, which is what the Vermont Racial Justice and ourselves call our approach, is a multimodal transportation improvements alternative to the obsolete, environmentally harmful, and racially unjust Southern Connector Champlain Parkway proposal. Here's what a intersection at Flynn and the Parkway would look like, that has a separate lane for bicyclists, fully separate lane, and separate crossing for pedestrians, separate crossing for the bicyclists. So you would have both bicyclists would be treated, and we could call this an equality intersection. We could call this a quality street project, and get away from the old style 20, 50 years ago design approach. Shall I stop there?
No, we'll give you 30 more seconds. I thought I heard earlier a summary. You had 3 points.
I'll stop there. I think that I've pretty well summarized that we're talking about, and I want to go back to the beginning slide, that essentially we're saying do the rail yard first. That relieves the congestion. It relieves the pressure on our low income center of the area, and also make sure we have a complete separate sidewalk and bikeway the entire route. So I'll stop there.
Great, thank you, Tony. Apologize that we were late this evening, and that your time was squeezed a little bit. Are there any questions for Tony before we move on to our redistricting topic?
Let me add one.
See hands.
Let me add one item here. You realize that the only reason that the rail yard project was considered is because Pine Street went to the U.S. District Court 2 years ago. It was the Federal Highway Administration recognized they would lose the case if they didn't deal with the environmental justice issue. We are still waiting at the courthouse door without a single piece of paper that's passed. If we cannot come to an agreement, if we cannot come to a collaborative approach here, the normal time to go through a full U.S. District Court proceeding, and by the way, it's not just the environmental justice, there's a dozen issues here, would normally take 5 to 6 years. we're still waiting to sit down with the, and have others at the table that would come up with a reasonable compromise to this project and go forward and to the benefit of the King Maple neighborhood, to the south end, and to the economy of our community.
All right, thank you, Tony. We're gonna move on. We are over 9 o'clock and we still have a good topic to go over. Thank you for your input this evening. Next, Mark and Sarah to talk about redistricting. Mark and Sarah, do
Sarah?
I love you. All right, Mark.
Do you want me to go ahead?
Go ahead.
Sure. So as Sarah indicated at the beginning of the meeting, we have a resolution we're going to be considering on Monday at Monday's City Council meeting to form an ad hoc redistricting committee made up of members of the community selected by the NPAs. So there will have an 8-person committee that will be convened, I think in the current version of the resolution, the target date is the committee formed by September 16th. Now we understand that if the Ward 47 NPA takes a 2-month hiatus, the next meeting will be later than that. So we were asking for a meeting earlier. And sometime in July or August would be ideal. And as Sarah indicated earlier, we could use that as an informational meeting. And if there was more than one person in Ward 4 and or 7, we could have elections for that position then as well. The committee, once convened, will hold 2 public meetings where input, I'm just reading from the resolution language. The committee will hold 2 public meetings where community input will be taken, and the committee will report back to the council at their last meeting in October. And the council will use this feedback to offer guidance by resolution to a mapping specialist. And some of the guidance that we'd be looking for from this ad hoc committee is info on public sentiment around the current configuration. We currently have 8 wards, each with a councilor, and 4 sort of semi-at-large districts. Is that a configuration people want to move forward with, or would they want to explore something different? We won't, and maybe Sarah, you may be more tuned in to when we'll have final census numbers, but we don't have final census numbers yet, so it's not even clear that we'll have to redistrict. Whether or not we have to redistrict, we still may want to have a community conversation about the current configuration of districts and wards. So Sarah, do you want to add?
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty much accurate. I mean, and we've been asked that. I think the last we heard, the census data won't come out till around about the same time we form the committee, which is mid-September. And I think the driver more for this is to find a way to get community input a little outside where the final lines will be, which will be a whole other conversation once we get census. But is the current configuration working? Could we do better? What other models can we look at? And so I think that's the first conversation. We don't have a true sense. Our sense is, to be honest, Burlington has not grown a lot, but we're not clear. And where it's grown, it's probably throughout the city. So we're just plain not sure, where the bubbles might be. But again, I think it's to start early, because this is just the beginning. It's not the end at all. I think, as Bob Hoover mentioned, the state's going to have a whole other conversation. And I think if we can start having conversations early, we can sort of keep an eye on what happens to us and what may happen to Burlington. And correct me if you think I'm wrong. Chittenden County may stand to gain reps, but I'm not sure that Burlington will. So that may influence some of our thinking as well. And then of course there's the whole conversation around Senate, which is probably not as doesn't make as much difference, but there will be a conversation on the Senate. So I think our thinking is we just like to get this started early. And the concept of the NPA is how to get some true community voices, not those of us that are elected or have been elected in the past. At some level, there'll be enough jockeying about that in the future. So we wanted to start early with just getting people's thinking.
And the other thing I would add is that for those who lived through the 2013 debacle that was redistricting, part of the motivation here is to get ahead of it and avoid that. So that's where it is.
Lee had a question.
Yeah, is this written up somewhere? The makeup of the committee and when the meetings are going to be? Is this, was this a decision at council?
Yeah, the resolution that Mark read from is posted and or will be posted. I can send that out. So yes.
We should have a final draft on board docs that we'll be considering, I would guess tomorrow.
Yeah.
Can you just tell me quickly here what the makeup of the committee is?
Well, this resolution is just to form an ad hoc committee to start the process. So this is not the final committee that will make a recommendation. It's to start to get citizen input early.
But it's one member from each ward.
Yes.
As selected by the NPA in each ward, Lee.
There'll be 8 members.
Correct.
So what was the debacle of the previous redistricting? Was it because it got delayed so much and there was this north-south, the north end, south end dispute? Or I'm just curious what you mean, Mark.
Well, as I recall, and I think you were there for some of these meetings, Robert, was that there was a lot of contention. There was contention. There was that one meeting at DPW. There were plans that were recommended and then they were sort of disregarded and new plans were drawn up. I know that the map that we have now was authored by you,
right,
in the process.
Right.
And so, I mean, I have like a catalog that I just happen to have on a Google Drive of all these various maps that were put forward back then. But as I recall, there were 2 different sort of phases of the thing. There was the initial phase where there were maybe 3 or 4 plans that were put forward. And then those were taken up by a committee. And then the committee was finally, I think it was just, I don't know if we recall if it was disbanded or it just came to conclusion, but then some new plans were then introduced. But there was a lot of contentious, there wasn't a lot of definition around the process, in my view, of what the objectives of the committee that was convened was supposed to do, other than to come up with new maps. So I think there was a lot of competing agendas. So the idea here is to take some of the, it's political, but to take some of as much of that out as possible and try to gather some community sentiment about it before we go into a process, and then use that community guidance to inform a council process later with a mapping specialist.
What I remember though, what happened, I mean, in terms of mapping, I mean, we had Jay Appleton as, kind of the specialist in terms of getting it, but it was the decision to crowdsource the mapping And they put a website up. It was at burlingtonvotes.org or whatever it was. The web app was called District Builder, and that's where a lot of people created maps and submitted them and had them considered. I don't know. I mean, politics is what happens when people disagree about what the right thing to do is, or what's the best way to go forward. I would say that, I mean, there was the beginning when there was this committee, there's just a lot of dispute. And every time somebody in the South End drew a map, most of us in the North End didn't like it. And I thought that it was a little late. It was a year late.
Right.
But I didn't think that.
So debacle was too strong of a term. I'll take it back, but it was certainly a contentious and
there was a fuss. Oh yeah, there was definitely a fuss going on.
I think one thing too is we'd like to have a more of an open discussion on is the 8 wards, 4 districts.
It was
the
good.
best way? Should we go back to 7 wards, 14 councilors? Should we go to 9? Should we go to 16? And not focus as much on the lines as what would be good governance.
Sure.
And then backfill the lines when we get the data.
This is a little bit about what was going on in 2013, but the problem is that that we can do something completely different, and that might happen, but there's going to be some resistance from some sector. Like, let's say that you're going to ditch Ward 8, and I understand I remember the controversy about Ward 8, but you're limited. Essentially, the courts and the U.S. Constitution is going to force us as a city to have equal representation for populations. And if what was growing along that line along College Street was like some ethnic group like, Bosnians or something like that, and we just had this explosion where approximately 1/4 of the city was Bosnians living along College and Main Street, if we sliced and diced them up and put them a little bit in Ward 1 and a little bit in Ward 2 and a little in Ward 3 and a little in Ward 6, that is exactly what gerrymandering would be. And what we did was kind of the exact opposite. And as a result, we were able to keep the other 7 wards mostly intact.
Can I jump in here? Because I think, Robert, I appreciate your perspective and awareness of the history, but the core of this conversation really needs to be some advice for what the steering committee needs to do in the month of July in coordination with our city council members to hold some sort of a special meeting and to meet the timelines imposed by the resolution that may pass on Monday. So I guess I would offer to everybody on the call that on the meeting that steering committee meets next week, or are we meeting 4th of July week, or are we going to put it off for a week? Is a decision that the steering committee needs to make. So so that we can move forward, because this is a perfect example of what functioning MPA is really meant to do. So I look forward to NPA participation in this project, and to put it quite bluntly, I don't want us to screw up this opportunity. Sarah?
Sorry, Sarah, I muted you.
All right. Our ask is simply that we consider having a special meeting between now and the end of August to have a further discussion on this and talk about a process, and I asked the steering committee to set up a process so that we can elect somebody to this committee. And we obviously can't do that tonight, so we're just simply, can we have an hour and a half meeting sometime in the next 2 months with this as the focus and with the goal of electing somebody to a committee. Two people, because there'd be one from each ward.
I think Ali has his hand up.
Thank you, Mark. Yes, can I ask a question? I think it will be a comment and also a question. I think what you guys have talked about this resolution and what he's doing, Councilor Barlow did mention it, but I don't think that people pay attention to what he said. He said something very interesting, which is, it doesn't matter if we get the census, do we truly need a redistricting? And this resolution is setting a process if redistricting is needed. So I think that point is very important. To me, let's use, okay, the other thing that has not been mentioned is redistricting, and this process, when it unfolds, we are going to put it on the ballot. This is going to be a ballot item for voters of Burlington to vote on. Once the charter change, craft the language. This is only about the process. Now, the question is, why can't we wait until we know whether or not we need redistricting or not? And then this resolution can come forward. It is too soon, and I understand the concept about being proactive, about trying to do before they come up. Redistricting is not needed at every census. The last census, I don't think it happened. There was a census, it didn't happen. Do we know? I think this process, to me, this resolution should be about the NPAs themselves, all NPAs in the city, to start to think about redistricting by themselves. What ward do we need to eliminate? What type of system do we need to talk about and give them the power? And we wait until 2023 if we have a ballot item that need to go to the voters, introduce it then. So my question is whether or not we need, even though we need redistricting, whether or not we need to put it on the ballot in 2022. That's my question. Thank you.
I think that's a valid point. The one thing I'll say is I believe that one outcome is that we do nothing and we have the exact same system that we have now. This resolution does not mean that we want to change the system. We want to basically take the temperature of the community and see how they feel about the existing system. And I would say that the earlier we do it, the better, because if we do have to redistrict, then having to put it on the ballot on town meeting, if we don't put it on the 22 ballot, we'd have to put it on the 23 ballot. You know, that we certainly could do that, and that would be a year ahead of what we did in. Actually, it'd be a year ahead of what we did in 2000. I think we had it on the 14 ballot, and it went into effect on the 15 last time. So that's my perspective on it. I'd like to have the conversation. I don't necessarily know that we'll come up with something better. It was a difficult discussion last time, but there are people who, I've only served in districts, but districts are kind of a weird animal that are there, in my view, for mathematical reasons, not for representative reasons. That's just, and I was a big proponent back in the last time of the 16 councilor 8 ward system. I like the idea of having 2 councilors per system, but that was me back then. The community may have a different view of what works and what hasn't worked in the last bunch of years. So,
Mark, maybe now Ward 8 is able to produce 2 councilors for that ward, and we can go to 816. At the time, 8 years ago or whenever that was, 8 years ago, there was real questions about whether Ward 8 was going to be able to produce, a school counselor, yeah, or a school commissioner.
So again, I've strayed from the prime directive, and I know we're late here, so I'll.
And I think that's the goal of having the meeting in the committee, so we can more fully have this conversation. That's what I see.
So I think we'll see if we can get a meeting as early as July. Perhaps it'll be August. And everyone on the call, think about if they would like to be on this ad hoc committee.
And we need to think about the process about soliciting people to do it. So there's outreach. The resolution asks that the NPA do some outreach a little broader to get people just on this issue.
Okay. All right. If we are good, we will adjourn. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
For staying late too.